We're going to dive into a life that was built on absolute silence. Imagine meticulously constructing your entire world. A predictable job, a quiet routine, all of it designed to keep one single explosive secret locked away. Our focus is on a man named Evan, an elementary school teacher. And on the surface, he's the model of professional calm. But that stability, it's really just a shield. His classroom is almost like a personal holding cell, designed to keep him just busy enough to ignore a trauma he buried 20 years ago.
And that buried trauma is the entire engine of this story. We're looking at this terrifying case where, well, it seems that a deeply repressed memory, and more than that, this overwhelming guilt, it just manifested physically. This wasn't some subtle haunting. I mean, whatever this thing was, it systematically used proxies, in this case his own students, to dismantle his denial piece by piece. It was forcing him into a confrontation he'd spent half his life running from.
Yeah, and our mission here is to unpack these bizarre escalating incidents that Evan reported. It starts with children's drawings, things they couldn't possibly know, and it moves to this supernatural mimicry of his own buried words. And all of it, every single event, just peeled back this monumental lie about what really happened to his younger brother, Caleb. This is a deep dive into the terrifying price of an unforgiven secret.
Okay, so let's start where the facade first cracked. It happens in the most controlled, sterile environment Evan could have possibly created for himself, his third-grade classroom.
It was a Monday morning, totally routine, a little drizzle outside, the smell of damp coats, you know the scene. Evan, just leaning into the comfort of it all, gives the kids a simple warm-up task. Draw a character you'd like to write a story about. Just 10 minutes of quiet.
But the quiet just stops, cold. It stops when Evan gets to Joel, this quiet kid in the back of the room. Joel slides his drawing forward, and it's not a superhero. It's not some monster. It's a precise pencil-drawn portrait of Caleb, his brother, who vanished 2 decades ago.
And the specifics here are what make it so terrifying. It's the wide brown eyes, the exact way Caleb's hair fell unevenly. But the detail that just breaks you, the impossible detail, is this tiny, dark mole on the right cheekbone. A mole Caleb hated, one he always tried to cover in photos. Evan hadn't let himself picture that face in 20 years, and here it is, drawn by a child who couldn't possibly know.
Right. And what's immediately so unsettling is that the knowledge is hyper-specific, it's personal,
Yeah.
it bypasses any logical explanation. And then Joel gives the drawing a title, The Boy in the Leaves.
Evan is just reeling. He asks the boy where he saw him, and Joel just looks up completely earnest and says, "He told me to draw him, so you'd see."
The implication is just staggering, that this was an intentional message, a customized delivery just for Evan.
Evan tries to explain it away. Coincidence. Maybe the kids saw an old yearbook or a cartoon character that looks similar. Anything. But that rationalization gets completely torpedoed the very next day.
Yeah, because whatever this thing is, it senses his resistance, and it just accelerates the attack. Evan assigns a simple free-writing task, and suddenly, this shared narrative just emerges across multiple students' papers.
Exactly. And it's not just about what Caleb looked like. It's his private mannerisms. One girl, she usually writes about her cat. And now she's describing a boy with a lopsided smile that revealed a chipped front tooth. Caleb chipped that tooth when he was 7, falling off his bike. Who knows that?
And another student writes about how the boy laughed, like he couldn't quite catch his breath. Caleb had asthma. He would wheeze when he was really happy. Another kid mentions he walked funny.
Yeah.
Caleb had one leg that was just slightly shorter than the other. I mean, these are details that only exist inside a family's closest memories.
How could random 8-year-olds know this? That's the question that just starts screaming in his head.
And when he asks them, when he frantically pulls them aside and asks if they planned it, they all give him the same answer. We just saw him in our dreams. This tells us something critical. Evan isn't just being haunted by a memory. An entity is actively projecting a shared psychological intrusion. It's weaponizing the most vulnerable people around him.
And the sheer specificity of it all finally breaks through his denial. He realizes that if this thing knows Caleb so intimately, it must have access to a place he has avoided for 20 years. His mother's house.
A place he describes as being frozen in her grief. The whole house is a shrine, but Caleb's room, that's the center of it. Untouched. It's the perfect setting to force Evan to confront the actual location of his lie.
He finds his mother, and she's distraught. She's holding this envelope with no return address. Inside is another drawing, crayon this time. Again, it's Caleb standing in their old backyard.
Evan's first thought is that his mother sent it to herself, in her grief. But then he sees something in the drawing that alters his own memory. And this is where the repression and the reality just collide violently. For 20 years, Evan had constructed this safe lie for himself. He remembered the backyard behind Caleb as having this gentle, harmless slope, a safe place. But the drawing. The drawing showed the ground dipping sharply. It showed the actual treacherous embankment in the woods where his final argument with Caleb took place.
He said, looking at that drawing, the topography itself felt like an accusation. He hadn't just lied to the police. He'd spent 2 decades rewriting the geography in his own mind to make the scene of his crime feel less culpable.
Exactly. That's the power of repression. It sanitizes the trauma. Changing the slope of that hill lessened his own responsibility. But this drawing, from a source that remembered the real topography, it confirmed that this entity didn't just know Caleb. It knew Evan's sealed truth.
That was it. That was the moment he knew. Whoever or whatever was sketching Caleb wasn't just remembering the past. They were remembering Evan's real past, the one he had tried to erase.
And that realization just strips his professional veneer away completely. It leads to this desperate, panicked confrontation back at the school. The pressure was escalating, and Evan was starting to break.
He pulls Joel into his office. He's not gentle anymore. He's demanding to know where he heard about the boy. Joel, now he's scared, and he just insists the boy showed him everything. And then comes the whisper that just destroys Evan's entire world. Joel says, "He said you were there the night he changed."
That is the critical moment, the absolute turning point. For 2 decades, Evan's public story, his official lie, was that he hadn't seen Caleb after dinner. This information, that Evan was the last person with him in those woods, that was known only to Evan and to Caleb. The entity is now moved from revealing Caleb to revealing Evan's role in it all.
The pressure just peaks. Midday, he's staring out his classroom window. He can't focus, and he looks at the tree line bordering the school. And standing there, perfectly still, is a small figure, watching the building, watching him. And he knew, with a certainty that defied all logic, that the figure wore his brother's face.
But the final blow, the one that brought him to his knees, happened back inside the classroom. A moment of just profound, terrible mimicry.
His students, almost in unison, they start repeating phrases, but they weren't Caleb's words. They were Evan's own words from that night, words soaked in teenage cruelty that he thought he had buried forever. "You always slow me down. I'm not your babysitter. Just go."
This isn't just a haunting anymore. It's a direct psychological assault. It's weaponizing his own shame against him. The entity isn't just showing him the victim, it's forcing him to relive being the perpetrator.
And the climax of it all, a little girl, her eyes completely vacant, just a proxy, stares right at him and asks the question that burns away 20 years of denial. She asks, "Do you remember pushing him?"
And Evan said that was it. That was the end. He realized this wasn't some external ghost seeking justice. This was a terrifying reality peeling him open from the inside. The entity didn't just want a memory. It wanted a full confession.
And that desperation, it just drove him back to the woods that afternoon, back to the source.
And as he's there, the repressed memories finally just surge forward, fighting against all the lies. He finally sees the full, horrifying truth. He shoved Caleb, not to hurt him, just out of selfish frustration. Caleb stumbled. He went over the embankment, hit the ground hard, and Evan, terrified, just wanting to be free, made a choice. He walked away, and he justified it with the cruelest lie of all. He'll get up.
And the forest gave him immediate, chilling confirmation. Tacked to a tree was one last drawing, Caleb curled in the leaves, but behind him, emerging from the dark earth, was a pale, impossibly long arm cradling him, and the lettering beneath it just said, "I'm closer now."
The confession was the final trigger. When Evan finally sinks to his knees, overwhelmed, and says it out loud, "I pushed you, I walked away."
Yeah.
That act of accountability is what summons it.
Movement. In the hollow where Caleb had fallen, a small figure rises slowly. It's child-sized, but it's fundamentally wrong. The arms are too long, the joints move with the sickening liquid smoothness, and the eyes fixed on Evan glowed like lanterns shifting through frosted glass. It was a twisted caricature of his brother.
Evan whispers Caleb's name, and the entity tilts its head with the exact same curious motion he remembered. It says softly, "I waited for you." And for a split second, Evan feels this dangerous surge of relief, thinking maybe, just maybe, he can be forgiven.
But that's where the story shifts from haunting to consumption. The entity smiles. It's Caleb's smile, but it's stretched too wide, too sharp, and it whispers the truth. "He cried for you. I tasted everything he felt. His pain was delicious."
And then it leans in, focusing on Evan. But your guilt has aged into something exquisite.
The mimicry is over. A vertical seam, a line of darkness, opens on its face, tearing the familiar features apart. From inside, this long, thin proboscis emerges. It stabs into Evan's forearm, and it starts pulling something out. Not blood. Evan describes feeling decades of guilt just draining away, the solid weight of grief, his entire sense of self unraveling. The creature was literally feeding on the emotional fuel that his denial had cultivated for 20 years.
He was just slipping away into nothing. The creature was harvesting the trauma. But then, something else happens. A moment of profound sacrifice. Through the haze, Evan sees a small, child-sized silhouette, that familiar, uneven hair, and it wraps two small arms around the creature's torso, pulling it violently away from him.
The entity shrieks Evan's name in the sound like breaking glass, but the small figure holds on and it screams one word: go. It forces Evan to flee while this thing that wore his brother's face is held back, fighting a ghost.
Evan just runs. His mind is shattered, but he's empty of that crushing weight he's carried for 2 decades. He's safe, but the emptiness comes with this horrifying knowledge. Something fed on Caleb's abandonment, and in the end, it was a fragment of Caleb himself that saved the brother who left him there. It completely flips the narrative. It's not a story of punishment anymore. It's a horrific act of forgiveness.
And there's this final, lingering, chilling ambiguity. Days later, Evan is safe, but he's vacant, and he hears it. A faint, distant sound from the direction of the forest. Tapping. 3 light knocks, a pause, then one more. It was Caleb's old rhythm, the signal he used when he was scared and wanted his big brother to come back.
And that just raises the final haunting question for you, the listener. Was that tapping an echo of the past? A sign of forgiveness that survived the consumption? Or was it a final, terrifying goodbye before the silence settled for good? The entity consumed the guilt, but maybe the memory of love or the sound of need, maybe that survived.
So this deep dive, it tracked how one suppressed, selfish choice became a living, external entity, one that demanded a full physical confession. It consumed the very guilt that fueled it, and it revealed the profound difference between fleeing responsibility and finally facing it, even when facing it means being harvested.
And I think the final takeaway here is just, it's a chilling possibility. The idea that the truths we suppress don't just fade away. They might mature. They might evolve. And eventually, they might demand a reckoning that is so much worse than the original secret ever was.
So for you, the listener, consider the true cost of the unsaid. If denial creates fuel for something awful, does a complete confession, even under that kind of duress, truly earn you absolution? Or does it just create a new, deeper kind of vacancy? Something to think about the next time you hear a sound you can't quite place, tapping just out of sight?